In the year 1198, on December the 17th, Pope Innocent III officially recognized the Order of the Most Holy Trinity, Trinitarians, under the leadership of John DeMatha and Felix of Valois. Those of us sitting here are the inheritors of a tradition that stretches back 812 years, and a tradition that is fanatic, obsessively, heroically, devoted to the creation of justice here on earth. The vision that John DeMatha had when he said his first Mass of Jesus standing between a black man and a white man with a set of broken chains in his hands has led to some of the most remarkable stories of ransoming ever known. And we are part of that legacy. The Trinitarians are committed to freedom. Freedom from ignorance, from poverty, from materialism, from secularism, from relativism, as well as the freedom to be wise, to be truthful, to be demanding of ourselves and forgiving of others. In former days, Trinitarians such as Pedro DeMatha sailed with the explorer Vasco da Gama, and he died as a martyr. Father Roque opened a hospital and a college in North Africa. Father Bartolome Serrano founded 5 hospitals, 4 of them inside prisons, hospitals that certainly took care of the least of our brothers. The Trinitarians who staffed these hospitals took enormous risks. During times of plague, and there were 2 serious ones in 1690 and again in 1740, many Trinitarians died when they stayed in the hospitals to continue to serve the sick. Why would they do that? Why would they risk their lives? In part, the answer is because for the Trinitarians, their love of God finds its most complete expression in their service to humanity, in their service to the least of us. Father Robert Gauguin helped free more than 700 captives between 1482 and 1490. He worked tirelessly to make sure that the Trinitarians were staffed with teachers and doctors so that when captives were freed, they could still be taken care of. Father Bernard of Metz oversaw the ransoming of over 1,000 captives in the late 1500s. The Catholic Encyclopedia estimates that Trinitarians have been responsible for the ransoming of over 140,000 captives since their founding. One of the greatest novels ever written is Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes, and the plot of this novel is deceptively simple. A man in his middle 50s who has been reading tales about knights and giants and tournaments and magicians and damsels in distress decides that he wants to be one of these knights errant, as they were called, and to have adventures like theirs. And so the narrator tells us that, driven out of his mind by books, Don Quixote tries to become like the knights he has read about. He obtains a squire named Sancho Panza to assist him, and they ride about the countryside and have all sorts of adventures, many of which are comic and famous. Early on, for example, Don Quixote sees windmills spinning in the distance, and he's convinced that they're giants with many arms. He rides down to attack them. His lance is caught in one of the spinning arms. He's dragged across the ground, thrown from his horse. When his squire catches up and points out that they're windmills and not giants, he says, "Evil magicians have tried to rob me of my glory by changing them into windmills at the last minute." Well, there's no reasoning with logic like that. So there's much of this sort of slapstick comedy early on, but as the novel progresses, Cervantes realizes he has an opportunity to ask some really serious questions using his characters. Now, all of us here know that comedy can often make it possible to raise questions of a serious nature. If you've ever heard Chris Rock, you know that while he's being funny, he really makes us think about race. And the best comic movies often cause us to think about relationships between men and women, or how we see and treat each other. And so too with Cervantes, who is, we might say, seriously funny. At one point, a shepherd tries to get Don Quixote going and says to him, You know, you've really chosen an amazingly difficult profession, being a knight-errant. How do you think the difficulty of what you do compares to Carthusian monks? The Carthusians are hermits. They live in rooms that are called cells. They have no contact with the outside world. They spend their days in prayer and silence. They leave their rooms only 3 times each day. Quixote says to the question, churchmen in peace and quiet pray for the world's welfare, but we knights and soldiers put into effect what they pray for. We defend it with the might of our arms, not under shelter, but in the open air, and exposed to the intolerable rays of the summer sun and the piercing frosts of winter. Thus, we are God's ministers on earth, and the arms that implement His justice. In the amusing exchange between Quixote and the shepherd, a really serious idea about Christianity and how Christians should live is being asked. One response to that question is like the Carthusian monks, or the Trappists, or any other order that secludes itself from the world. And then there, of course, are religious lay people who live out in the world, people I hope like us. But the very first religious order to recognize and combine these 2 really important ways of being Christians in the world, that is praying for the world's welfare in thoughts and words, and working for the world's welfare by deed and action, that is being God's ministers on earth, is the order of the Most Holy Trinity, the Trinitarians. And Don Quixote is mocked at several points for what his detractors see as his too pious attitude. For example, he meets prostitutes at an inn, and he treats them as elegant ladies. And at first, both the prostitutes and the men in the bar make fun of Don Quixote. But eventually, the women begin to see themselves as he sees them, as ladies. He gets other people to act better than they are, to live up to standards they formerly thought unattainable, to consciously see goodness and beauty around them, even when that's hard to do. So where did Cervantes get the idea for Don Quixote, this idealist and this practical man, this man of action and this man of prayer, this dreamer and this doer? Well, I suspect he got it from the Trinitarians. In 1571, Cervantes fought heroically in the Battle of Lepanto, where he took 2 gunshot wounds to the chest and a 3rd that paralyzed his left arm. In 1575, still working for the king and government, he was captured on a mission and spent 5 years in captivity as a slave. In 1580, he was ransomed by 2 Trinitarians, Father Juan Gil and Brother Antonio della Bella. Often, the Trinitarian diplomats who were trying to free captives were forced to exchange themselves for those that they rescued. So, when Don Quixote shows himself to be a man of prayer and a man of action, a man who is determined to fight for justice regardless of the cost to himself, and a man whose treatment of others gives meaning to the word gentleman, we know that he was working from the model of the Trinitarians, who throughout their history have been feeding the hungry, visiting prisoners, caring for the sick, clothing the naked, and working for the least of our brothers. This is the 812-year-old tradition that we have inherited. And like Cervantes, we are remarkably blessed to have the ongoing model of the Trinitarians in front of us. Please join me in thanking the Trinitarians for their example, their charisma, and their history.